There was no battle, no sinking ship, no dramatic footage. Yet one morning, a Russian oil tanker was no longer in Russian control, and almost no one noticed. This is the story of how a modern power seizes an enemy asset without firing a single shot. The tanker wasn't just carrying fuel, it carried leverage, sanctions pressure, political meaning, and that made it dangerous. Not because it was armed, but because it moved through the wrong waters at the wrong moment. The ship entered a legal gray zone, international waters. Insurance complications, sanctions overlap. And that's when the operation began. Not with soldiers, but with lawyers. The tanker was redirected. Port access delayed. Insurance coverage questioned. Every step was legal. Every move was calm, until the ship stopped moving. No force was used. None was needed. To understand how this happened, we must go back to the days following the invasion. As tanks rolled across the border, another war was being waged, a war of economics. Western nations, led by the United States and the European Union, unleashed a barrage of sanctions designed to cripple Russia's economy and starve its war machine of funds. At the heart of this strategy was Russian energy. Oil and gas are the lifeblood of the Kremlin's budget, funding everything from pensions to cruise missiles. The goal was simple: cut off this flow of cash. But the execution was anything but. The global energy market is a complex web of producers, traders, shippers, and insurers. You can't just flip a switch. A full immediate embargo on Russian oil would send global prices skyrocketing, potentially triggering a worldwide recession and damaging the very economies trying to apply the pressure. So, a more nuanced approach was developed: a price cap. The idea, championed by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, was to allow Russian oil to continue flowing to global markets, preventing a supply shock, but only if it was sold at or below a specific, artificially low price. This would slash Russia's profits while keeping the lights on in countries like India and China, who were still major buyers. To enforce this, the coalition of countries leveraged their dominance over a critical, yet often invisible, part of global trade: maritime insurance. The vast majority of the world's tanker fleet is insured by a small group of companies based in the UK and the EU, known as the International Group of P&I Clubs. Without this insurance, a ship is essentially undockable. No port will accept an uninsured vessel carrying millions of gallons of flammable crude oil. It's too great a liability. The rule was clear: if you want our insurance, you must abide by the price cap. Any ship owner, trader, or financier caught dealing in Russian oil above the cap would lose their coverage and be blacklisted. This created a shadow fleet, a ragtag collection of aging tankers, often owned through opaque shell companies, willing to operate outside the Western system. They engaged in deceptive practices, turning off their transponders to hide their location, conducting risky ship-to-ship transfers in the open ocean, and falsifying documents to disguise the origin and price of their cargo. For a time, it seemed to work. Russia was still getting its oil to market, albeit at a discount and with much greater difficulty. The economic war settled into a tense stalemate. It was a cat-and-mouse game played out across the world's oceans. But the coalition was watching, gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to tighten the screws. They were looking for a test case, a target that would send a clear message. And that's when a tanker named the Sveti Nikola departed from the Russian port of Taman, loaded with 1 million barrels of Urals crude. The vessel itself was unremarkable: a mid-sized Aframax tanker built over 2 decades ago. Flying the flag of Liberia, common practice for international shipping, its ownership was a maze of nested companies leading back to a state-controlled Russian shipping conglomerate. Its stated destination was a port in India. On paper, everything appeared to be in order. The cargo attestation claimed the oil was sold below the $60 per barrel price cap. But investigators in Washington and London were suspicious. The numbers didn't quite add up. shipping costs, insurance premiums, trading fees when all the hidden costs were factored in. It seemed highly improbable that the transaction was compliant. They suspected the official paperwork was a lie, designed to secure Western insurance for an illegal sale. The Sveti Nikolai was not just a ship. It was a probe sent by Moscow to test the resolve of the sanctions regime, and the West was about to send its answer. The operation didn't begin with a naval patrol or a Coast Guard boarding. It began with an email. A quiet inquiry was sent from the UK's Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation to the ship's London-based insurer. The email was polite but firm, requesting detailed documentation of the Sveti Nikola's recent voyage and the specifics of its cargo sale. This single email triggered a chain reaction. The insurer, legally obligated to cooperate, immediately put a hold on the ship's coverage pending investigation. Suddenly, the Sveti Nikola, now halfway across the Mediterranean, was a pariah. Without insurance, its destination port in India would refuse its entry. Captain Alexei Volkov was now in command of a million-barrel floating problem. He was under orders from his superiors in Moscow to continue his voyage, but his path was now blocked. He couldn't go forward, and turning back to Russia would be a failure. He was trapped, not by a naval blockade, but by a wall of digital paperwork and legal liability. The ship slowed, its engines idling as it drifted in international waters, waiting for instructions that made sense in a world where a lawyer's letter was more powerful than a warship. Russia protested, quietly, because escalation over a tanker was not worth escalation with America. The ship stayed where it was, the oil stayed where it was, and the message was delivered. This wasn't a naval combat story. It was a story of control over systems, ports, insurance, law, timing, finance. And this is how strategic power works now. The tanker was never destroyed, never attacked. It was simply removed from relevance. In the modern world, the strongest moves are the ones that never look like war. The Stalingrad remained anchored off the coast of New Orleans for weeks, then months, becoming a symbol of frozen conflict of floating embargo. Eventually, the logistical pressure and the sheer cost of maintaining a stranded, useless vessel became too much for the Russian holding company. The oil, originally destined for Europe, had to be rerouted, costing millions in penalties and new transport contracts. The cargo itself, deemed politically toxic and logistically impractical, was eventually sold at a deep discount to a non-aligned buyer, weeks after its intended delivery window had closed. But the physical fate of the Stalingrad wasn't the lasting consequence. The real impact was on the global maritime and insurance markets. Following the seizure, insurance premiums spiked across the board for vessels carrying sanctioned or politically sensitive cargo. Banks became extremely cautious about issuing letters of credit for voyages originating from or bound for specific ports, effectively widening the scope of the original sanctions without a single new law being passed. It was a textbook case of regulatory risk being amplified by targeted executive action. For the analysts in the Pentagon and Foggy Bottom, the operation was a resounding success. They hadn't needed missiles or warships. They needed a team of dedicated lawyers, economists, and intelligence officers who understood the intricate gears of global commerce better than their adversaries. They proved that in the 21st century. A financial chokehold can be far more effective and less internationally provocative than a physical blockade. The era of kinetic warfare as the sole arbiter of global power was over. The Stalingrad incident demonstrated that the true battleground had shifted from the oceans and the skies to the spreadsheets and the courtrooms. The rules of engagement had changed entirely, valuing leverage and information over sheer military might. The quiet, bureaucratic removal of a massive oil tanker from the global supply chain marked not just the successful enforcement of a specific sanction, but the arrival of a new, complex methodology for conducting geopolitical conflict. It was a form of soft power, so effective it barely registered as aggression, yet its impact rippled across continents and industries. Today, the lessons learned from the Stalingrad operation continue to inform global policy. Every major nation now maintains units dedicated not to traditional intelligence gathering or combat planning, but to mapping out and exploiting these vulnerable logistical and financial nodes, the weak points in the interdependent global machine. We are now living in the age of the algorithmic deterrent, where the threat of financial exclusion carries weight equal to the deployment of military divisions. The Stalingrad incident concluded not with a bang, but with a series of complex wire transfers and legal filings, proving that the most profound victories in the modern world are often the ones you barely notice happening. To understand the complex financial and political mechanisms that shape our world, we invite you to explore the other chapters of this documentary series, detailing the history of strategic leverage in global trade.